I was on a great album that Tom Jones did in Nashville. The song Darling was on that album, but I cannot remember one thing about the session. I'm so sorry, Tom, but you probably don't remember me either.
For almost 6 decades, if you stepped into the Grand Ole Opry on a Saturday night, you didn't need to look for Jimmy Capps. You heard him first. His guitar spoke louder than words ever could, even though he wasn't the one standing in the spotlight. He wasn't the voice behind the mic, but his guitar carried legends across that stage like a smooth river guiding a boat. The crowd may have cheered for the big names, but the real ones, the musicians, knew exactly who kept the Opry steady. That clean-cut man with his Fender Telecaster tucked tight against his chest wasn't just another player. He was the anchor holding the whole show together. They called him the master of smooth transitions, and for good reason. Jimmy could move from one song to the next, one star to another, without missing a single beat. His playing wasn't flashy or showy. It was pure perfection. If the Grand Ole Opry was the heart of country music, then Jimmy Capps was its quiet, steady heartbeat, the pulse that kept it alive while others soaked up the lights. He played behind the biggest names in country: George Jones, Alan Jackson, Vince Gill, and so many more. He never chased credit, never needed the applause, but somehow always made everyone around him sound better. In 2020, before he passed at 81, Jimmy did something rare. Instead of shining the light on himself, he turned it toward the artists who shaped not just the Opry, but him. These weren't random picks. They were personal. Each artist symbolized something that mattered to Jimmy: humility, fire, soul, tradition, and heart. His words showed exactly who he was: loyal, grounded, and completely devoted to the music that gave his life meaning. Among his chosen 5 was the legendary Dolly Parton, a mix of charm, brilliance, and confidence that left Jimmy absolutely spellbound. Then came George Jones, whose voice carried every ounce of pain and heartbreak you could imagine. Alan Jackson stood tall, proving that country's roots could survive any era. Vince Gill brought kindness and grace that stayed with Jimmy long after the spotlight dimmed. And Charlie Daniels, that wild spark of energy, pushed everyone on stage to play harder and love the music deeper. To Jimmy, these weren't just stars, they were family. They embodied the real soul of the Opry, and to understand that, you have to step into Jimmy's memories, to see these legends not as distant icons, but as the people who made his world whole. To Jimmy, Dolly wasn't just another country superstar. She was the living heartbeat of the Opry. He'd often laugh when he talked about her, saying, "Dolly wasn't just beautiful. She was sexy in the way she carried her confidence." And he didn't mean it in a shallow way, not at all. What he admired was the way she could walk on that stage like she owned every inch of it, yet somehow made everyone else feel like they belonged there too. Her smile could light up the room, her quick jokes had the crowd grinning, and the way she connected with people reminded Jimmy exactly why the Opry mattered so much. This wasn't just music, it was comfort, hope, and fire, all wrapped in one voice. Back when Dolly was still fighting to make her mark in Nashville, Jimmy was already there, part of the Opry's house band, strumming away behind her as she sang Jolene and Coat of Many Colors. He played so smoothly that people often didn't even notice him, lost in Dolly's magic. But she noticed. Unlike some stars who only kept their eyes on the audience, Dolly always showed love to the band. She'd give a little nod, toss a joke Jimmy's way, or flash that famous wink of hers. And to a quiet man who lived in the shadows, that tiny bit of recognition meant everything. What Jimmy loved most about Dolly wasn't just her talent, it was her humanity. She could be larger than life, glittering under those Opry lights, but she never forgot where she came from. She told stories about growing up poor in the Smoky Mountains, and when she sang, you could feel that truth. That was the essence of real country, born from struggle, polished by pure heart, and delivered with honesty that hit deep. In Dolly, Jimmy saw the perfect mix of glamour and grit. She proved you could rise to the top without selling your soul. And every time his guitar gently filled the space between her words, he felt like part of something bigger, not just a backing band, not just a show, but a family. If Dolly was the shining star who lit up the Opry stage, then George Jones was the storm that shook it to its core. To Jimmy Capps, George wasn't just another singer. He was the raw spirit of country itself. George's voice carried both pain and beauty, tangled together like lightning in a bottle. Jimmy had played behind him countless times, and every show was a wild card. One night, George would sound fragile, his voice breaking under the weight of his demons. And the next, he'd hit the crowd with a fire so fierce it could shake the walls. Through it all, Jimmy stayed steady, his guitar a rock for George to lean on. He used to say that when George Jones opened his mouth, it wasn't just singing, it was a soul being poured out, one note at a time. Jimmy admired that rawness, that honesty. George wasn't about perfection, he was about truth, and that's exactly what made him unforgettable. George Jones's voice carried every ounce of heartbreak he'd ever lived through. Every broken marriage, every lonely night, every battle with the bottle. To Jimmy, that kind of honesty wasn't just music. It was art in its truest form. There was a deep connection between them, one that didn't need words. Jimmy knew exactly how to move with George, when to soften his guitar as George's voice cracked with pain, and when to strike harder when the fire came roaring back. That kind of unspoken rhythm only comes from respect, and Jimmy had endless respect for the possum. Jimmy also understood the weight George carried, the missed shows, the tabloid chaos, the demons that chased him through his career, but Jimmy never judged him. He looked past the mess and focused on the magic, the music that rose above the struggle. When George sang, "He Stopped Loving Her Today," Jimmy felt it down to his bones. It wasn't just a song, it was a sermon, pure heartbreak turned into sound. To Jimmy, George was the Opry's raw soul, imperfect, human, but unforgettable. George might not have been polished, but he was real, and in Jimmy's world, being real meant more than hitting every perfect note. That's what made George sacred in his eyes. When Jimmy Capps listed Alan Jackson among his 5 most beloved Opry artists, it wasn't just about skill, it was about trust. Alan was proof that traditional country music wasn't dying. It was still alive and kicking. Alan walked into Nashville in the late 80s like a man carrying the torch of every honky-tonk hero before him. Tall, soft-spoken, and grounded, he wasn't out to reinvent country. He was there to remind people what it really was. Songs like "Chasin'," "That Neon Rainbow," and "Here in the Real World" hit Jimmy deep. They felt like echoes from a simpler time, the kind of country you could feel in your chest. On the Opry stage, Alan moved with quiet confidence. He never demanded the spotlight, just like Jimmy. He respected the band, always turning mid-performance to give a nod, flash a grin, or say, "Thank you." That humility hit home for Jimmy. For a man who'd played behind countless stars, it meant something when someone at Alan's level treated every musician on stage as an equal. That kind of respect didn't go unnoticed. Jimmy also saw Alan as more than a singer. He saw him as a bridge. The Opry had always been about holding on to tradition while still letting the sound evolve, and Alan did that better than anyone. His music carried that twang, that storytelling heart of old-school country. But his rise in the 90s brought those roots to a whole new crowd. Jimmy once said, "When Alan sings, you know the roots are still alive." There were countless nights when Jimmy's guitar wrapped around Alan's voice, filling the Opry air with songs like "Remember When" and "Don't Rock the Jukebox." And in those moments, it was clear Alan wasn't just honoring the past, he was keeping it alive. And Jimmy was right there with him, keeping that rhythm steady and true. In those powerful moments on stage, Jimmy felt something rare, a connection deeper than just music. It wasn't just about the notes or rhythm, it was about values. He and Alan shared the same roots. Both came from humble beginnings, both prized honesty over flash, and both believed that country music should tell the real stories of real people. To Jimmy Capps, Alan Jackson wasn't just another hitmaker. He was living proof that the true spirit of the Opry was still alive. That legacy wasn't fading. It was burning strong, carried proudly by a new generation that still respected the old ways. If George Jones was the stormy voice of heartbreak and Dolly Parton the radiant light that filled the room, then Vince Gill was the calm after the storm, the quiet gentleman who proved that kindness could shine just as bright as talent. Jimmy had endless love for Vince, not just for his incredible voice, but for his character. Unlike some stars who towered above their bands, Vince always stood with his musicians, never above them. He made it a point to thank the players during every show, calling them out by name, sharing the spotlight instead of hoarding it. For someone like Jimmy, who spent decades playing from the shadows, those gestures hit hard. That kind of respect meant everything. Their connection ran even deeper through their shared love for the guitar. Vince wasn't just a singer, he was a player. He could shred through a solo, pluck out a sweet melody, or lay down a rhythm smoother than silk. Jimmy admired that, not just the sound, but the dedication behind it. Vince respected the craft, not just the fame. Jimmy never forgot the moments backstage when Vince would come off stage, sweaty and smiling, and say, "Jimmy, that lick you played was beautiful." Few stars even noticed those details. But Vince did. That humility, mixed with world-class talent, earned Jimmy's lifelong respect. And that voice, soft, soulful, and rich with emotion, could bring a crowd to tears. Jimmy often said Vince's singing had the same honesty he brought to his friendships. No arrogance, no ego, just pure sincerity. In a business where fame could twist people, Vince stayed grounded. Jimmy used to joke, if the Opry had a son-in-law everyone wanted, it'd be Vince Gill. Dependable, talented, respectful. Vince had it all. To Jimmy, he embodied everything the Opry stood for. Great music, humble hearts, and genuine humanity. But then came a man who brought fire instead of calm, Charlie Daniels. If Vince Gill was the gentle heart of the Opry, Charlie was its roaring soul. Charlie didn't just play music, he attacked it. Every note that came from his fiddle blazed with wild energy, his voice, his stage presence, his spirit. All of it burned bright, like he was trying to set the whole room on fire. When Charlie Daniels walked under those Opry lights, you felt it before he even played a note. The air changed, the crowd straightened up, and the room started to buzz with electricity. Jimmy admired that fearlessness, that full-on, no-holding-back kind of passion. The Devil Went Down to Georgia wasn't just a song, it was a battle cry. Every time Charlie Daniels tore into that fiddle, Jimmy was right there in the mix, his guitar weaving through the chaos like sparks flying off steel. He loved those moments, the rush, the rhythm, the thrill of standing shoulder to shoulder with pure fire on stage. But behind all that heat, there was real respect. Charlie Daniels didn't just love the Opry, he lived for it. And he never treated Jimmy like some faceless backup musician. To Charlie, Jimmy was part of the Opry's very heartbeat. Offstage, they shared plenty of good times too, laughing, trading stories, swapping riffs until the early hours. Those moments showed just how much they truly respected each other's craft. Jimmy admired Charlie's versatility more than anything. Charlie refused to stay boxed in. One night, he was blazing through Southern rock. The next, he was pouring his soul into gospel or pure country. That kind of fearlessness spoke to Jimmy's own journey. He'd spent his whole life adapting, sliding into whatever sound a star needed. Never the loudest voice, but always the most reliable one. In Charlie, Jimmy saw passion personified, the kind of raw, fearless energy that reminded you why you ever picked up an instrument in the first place. Even years later, when Jimmy spoke about Charlie, his voice still lit up with excitement. To him, Charlie Daniels was living proof that music wasn't just sound. It was fire, spirit, and life itself, and that fire was contagious. Whenever they shared a stage, it pushed Jimmy to play harder, to dig deeper, to keep that same spark alive every time his fingers touched the strings. When Jimmy Capps named his 5 favorite Opry artists, Dolly Parton, George Jones, Alan Jackson, Vince Gill, and Charlie Daniels, it wasn't just a random list. It was a reflection of who he was. Each name painted a piece of Jimmy's soul, not in words, but in music. Dolly represented the charisma and confidence he admired, the proof that country music could shine bright without losing its roots. George Jones stood for raw truth, that unfiltered emotion that turns pain into art. Alan Jackson carried tradition forward, showing that the Opry's heart could still beat strong in modern times. Vince Gill reminded the world that kindness and humility could be just as powerful as talent. And Charlie Daniels, he was the embodiment of fire and freedom, that electric pulse that makes every great performance unforgettable. Together, those 5 names told Jimmy Capps's own story. He was a man who valued sincerity over fame, humility over ego, and soul over showmanship. He might not have stood in the spotlight often, but every time Jimmy picked up his guitar, you could hear those same qualities in every note. Steady like Alan, soulful like George, humble like Vince, fiery like Charlie, and quietly magnetic like Dolly. In the end, those artists weren't just his heroes. They were reflections of what Jimmy believed deep down, that real country music wasn't about fame or flash, it was about heart. Country music was never meant to be about the spotlight. It was always about what happened behind the curtain. Jimmy Capps understood that better than anyone. His guitar never told a lie. It spoke through every soft note that carried a ballad, every sharp twang that fired up a fast tune, and every subtle fill that stitched a whole performance together. His choices reminded everyone that the Grand Ole Opry wasn't built on headlines or glitter. It was built by people who believed in music as truth. And that truth lived inside Jimmy until the very end. On June 2nd, 2020, the Opry didn't just lose a guitarist, it lost its heartbeat. Jimmy Capps passed away quietly, the same way he had lived, never chasing the spotlight, never asking for applause, just letting his music do the talking. But before he left this world, he gave us something unforgettable, a gift. He spoke the names of 5 artists who carried his admiration, his respect, and his heart. In naming them, Jimmy revealed who he truly was, a man whose soul beat for humility, fire, tradition, truth, and heart. He showed us that behind every unforgettable song, there was someone like him, a quiet force keeping the rhythm alive, not for fame, but for pure love of the music. Since his passing, the Opry stage hasn't felt quite the same. The lights still glow, the crowd still roars, and the stars still sing. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear him. That smooth transition, that steady rhythm, that gentle guitar that once carried the weight of legends still echoes softly in the shadows. Jimmy Capps might not stand there anymore, but his spirit, oh, it lingers. It lives in every note that rings through the Grand Ole Opry, in every song that still carries that same heartbeat he left behind. His legacy isn't just in the music he played, it's in those 5 names he spoke with love. Because in doing that, Jimmy gave us one last reminder that country music is family, and family never fades. If you felt that story deep down, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories about the legends who shaped country music. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.